The previous post discussed how thousands of people, mostly children and those over 70 years, are killed or injured each year due to cars backing over them. Most of these accidents occur in driveways and shopping parking lots. There's a bundle of modifications to the way that we drive which could help reduce this. And I'd just like to go through some of these that I've collected from online right now. The first is backing into parking spaces, or driveways or alleys. And this dramatically would reduce the chance of accidentally running someone over by backing over them. First, because in order to back into a spot, you have to drive past it. And in doing so, there's an opportunity to completely visualize that the spot is empty. And that spot itself might be protected by other cars or buildings, which would further reduce the chance that someone might walk into the space as you back into it. Having backed into the parking space, it then places the driver in a safer position to leave it because you're facing forward. This not only obviously improves the visibility directly in front of the car, but also increases the visibility to the left and the right because of the angle. Making back-in parking is the default, or making it the default in places like schools or church parking lots seems like a no-brainer. And some might argue that access to the trunk is essential for loading from some stores, and I see this argument, and there'll actually be a future post discussing a potential workaround for this. The second is backup cameras on cars. In 2008, the US government passed the Cameron-Gulbranson Kids Transportation Safety Act, and that mandated that all cars sold in the US or leased in the US starting in 2018 would require a rear-view camera. The act also mandated power window safety modifications that would prevent crush deaths and modifications to prevent motor vehicle rollaways. The rear-view camera is a huge step forward in backup safety, but they're certainly not perfect. I find in the winter months or when wet that the camera easily gets obscured and then becomes useless. If you want to add one to your car and don't have one, you can install one aftermarket for a few $100s, or you can even buy a whole 360-degree camera system for your vehicle. The next recommendation is that one could back up their car with a window down, and this would make it possible to hear if you're running over someone. And this might be particularly useful if you're in a very busy parking lot, especially during holiday seasons, because during the holidays, people are rushed and hurried, their hands are full, and there's an increased chance that kids might run away in parking lots, and this would therefore increase the risk of an injury. And another recommendation is to walk around the vehicle before getting in. And so by taking that long route to get to the driver's side door, by going around the car from the other side, you can look to see if there's any children or pets or stuff like bikes or brooms that might be in front of or behind the car. From looking online, it seems that this type of practice is actually pretty routine in people with military training before they get into a vehicle. And I think it's a pretty easy modification to make. The obvious in terms of driveway maintenance, high hedges, high piles of snow, and fences all increase the risk that some pedestrian or cyclist or car is going to get hit on exiting from that driveway. And then we get to the very large topic of childhood education. Teaching kids car safety from a very early age is obviously essential. And when you're at a position when the children are actually too young to follow directions reliably, but are already walking, so think maybe 1 or 2 years old, what's recommended online is that locks should probably be put on all the doors of the house to prevent children from leaving the house without an adult. It seems that a number of fatalities and injuries occur when a child leaves the house without an adult knowing. So the standard example would be that the kid sees someone is coming home, they run out of the house and run into the driveway, or they see that someone left to leave the house, and then they follow their way out and find themselves in the driveway as the car is backing out. And so locks would be kind of the first step before children can actually reliably follow any instructions. In terms of road safety, there's the obvious. lessons about, not running into the street or looking both ways before crossing the road. But perhaps an important addition to that might be that children should be particularly careful when they're on a sidewalk and they're crossing over a driveway. It might be a good rule for children to never play on the driveway, on the cul-de-sac, or on the parking lot without an adult directly watching them. And this type of a practice might be particularly helpful if your kids maybe go over to other people's houses because they could follow this type of a rule there. It seems that commercial parking lots are particularly hazardous because it's very hard to keep kids from darting off when your hands are full. And for this reason, some sites recommend that young children are either carried in strollers or in shopping carts when walking across the parking lot. In general, it seems that children should be taught to never cross or walk across a parking lot without an adult beside them. And more generally, kids should just never walk behind or in front of a running vehicle, again, without an adult right beside them. I came across something called a Parking Pal, which is a magnetic sticker that you could put on the side of your car. And the idea would be that if you're in a busy parking lot, that the children would place their hands on the sticker as you load or unload the car. And so in theory, this would reduce the risk of them wandering into the parking lot. I think, maybe the sticker isn't required, but this idea of having a general practice and a routine of where kids stand when the car is loaded and unloaded does make sense. And I could easily see how if your head is in the car as you're loading or buckling in another child or putting bags into the car, and then someone darts out into the parking lot, that's very easy for an accident to happen. The next post will look at the question of why Americans don't back into parking spaces. And it's a bit bizarre, everything I found around that.